Hello, a big welcome to everybody here, and thank you for joining us today for the Roundtable talk, Living the Power of Youth. My name's Izzy, and I'm one of the iwill ambassadors.
Hi, I'm Lucy, and I'm also one of the iwill ambassadors.
And so Lucy and I are your hosts for today's session, which is part of iwill Week, an annual celebration of youth social action across the UK. As the iwill movement, we are building a society that understands and champions the power of youth, where all young people are equipped and enabled to shape and lead change in our own lives and communities. Today's session is just one of the many events and activities being delivered this year as part of iwill Week. So make sure to visit www.iwill.org.uk to see the full listing of events, activities, and resources.
So with us today, we have 8 guests from 5 very different organisations who have at least one thing in common, which is that they are living the power of youth. So we know that there is always room for improvement, and there is no organisation who is perfect, but the people joining in with us today are all committed to ensuring that young people and youth social action is embedded into the work they do every single day.
So we have 4 big questions based on our vision for the movement. Which is, as the iwill movement, we are building a society that understands and champions the power of youth, where all young people are equipped and enabled to shape and lead change in their own communities and lives. To kick off our discussion, I'm going to go straight to James from Raleigh with our first question. Thinking about your organization's infrastructure and operations to enable young people to be involved in social action, what is it that works well, and what still needs to adapt in order to make social action more inclusive to young people?
Thanks, Izzy. Yes, as you can probably all spot, I'm probably the only person who's not young here, but that's probably also why I've been invited, because actually it's really important that we as older people actually create an enabling environment for young people too. So hopefully I'm going to give a good account of what I think Raleigh International does. We're a global youth action organisation, so the clue's kind of in our descriptor of the organisation. But are we doing it well? Are we not? And I guess that's what I'd love to share with you now, just over the next minute or so. I think to start with what I think anyway we're doing well is, I guess if I was to put this into different buckets, I think in terms of governance and structure, we do a couple of good things. We have a board of trustees, 4 of them are technically young people. We used to call them youth trustees, but we actually thought it was a bit disrespectful, so we've ditched the youth prefix, but they're all under the age of 24, so that's great. We're actually having at the top level of the topmost level of the organisation, we're having young people basically driving forward a lot of the decision making, strategy and governance, which is great. We also have a youth advisory group on any kind of major strategic topics that we go and consult with too. I think in terms of listening, which is probably the most important thing we can do, is firstly, how do we make sure that we do work that resonates with young people? Well, through active listening. So in our strategy process last year, we actually went out and spoke to young people in 11 different countries around the world. We then produced a report called Tomorrow is Too Late, which was the findings of that report, and that led the foundation of our next strategy period. We also do a lot of his listening exercises, for example, when we look at whether we take funding or sort of develop partnerships with different types of entity. We also then go and consult with young people to see what they think about those entities and whether we would be right to partner with them. Widening participation is important to us. This kind of links to what I think we probably still need to do a lot of work on. We have something called the Access Fund on one of our programs, and also a bursary scheme on many of our other international programs. But we can do more on this. I'll come back to that in a second, but that's really useful, obviously, to making sure that people can volunteer with Raleigh who perhaps wouldn't normally be able to afford it. Youth voice, I think this is really important. We see ourselves as supporting young people with the platforms and the skills also to make sure their voices are heard, quite rightly. We don't need to give them a voice. You've all got a voice, but we're just trying to help you amplify it. So we often do things like social media takeovers, offering up blogs, speaking opportunities at events. And I'm very proud to say that actually, you know, we're in the second week of COP26. Even our trustee, Phoebe Hanson, you might have all seen on the Youth and Public Empowerment Day last Friday. She was up there giving a keynote speech all about climate education in Britain, which is phenomenal. Final 2 bits, possibly the most important though, we also have, as part of our program design and And of course our delivery, because actually I should have mentioned that we deliver all of our programs and projects through youth volunteers. That's probably one of the most tangible ways you can do take action with Raleigh. But also we do involve young people at the start of the design process with all of our programs and projects. So they're very much part of designing what it is we do, and therefore creating the impact in that way too. And then one of the things we've just recently launched in the last sort of 6 months or so, we've got a global environmental action campaign called Action Not Excuses, which I'm proud to say Annie's is part of too. That means that wherever you are on the planet, there's often different ways you can take action. You don't have to be sort of taking part in a formal program with Raleigh. We think this is a bit more of an inclusive way of going about things. What's really cool about it though, of course, if you go to actionnotexcuses.org, you'll find there's a buzzing community there of about 1,200 young people from countries across the planet who are all now connecting and collaborating with each other. This is one of the best things we can do. We'll give them the platform, and of course you young people, you'll get on and make the change happen regardless anyway. This is the stuff I think we're doing well. I think the stuff that we could do better, coming back to widening participation, because you have to fundraise to take part in a Raleigh program, it does mean that therefore some people actually just automatically exclude themselves. They don't feel they've got the, well, they can't afford to pay for it. And not that we want people to pay for it anyway, but even if you're fundraising, you need a good network to be able to do that with. Not everyone comes from the right kind of network that can offer those kind of opportunities. That's, you know, something that we think is a big problem, you know, and it's a problem for us that we need to solve. We need it to be equitable volunteering. So this is something now we need to really, really crack. And it's one of our biggest strategic challenges going forwards as well. So I think that's probably the one biggest thing I think we need to do much, much better at to enable more inclusive participation of young people to take social and environmental action with Raleigh.
Thank you for that, James. That looks like there's some exciting stuff coming up in the future in the pipeline. Just to follow on to that, I would like to go to Annie. What do you think needs to adapt in organisations to make social action more inclusive?
Hello, thank you to both of you, actually, James, for kind of, I'm going to move around a little bit whilst I speak. Excuse me, I've got a cold as well, so if my voice cracks at any moment, that's just kind of the position I'm in. So I think, I mean, I'll start with kind of my experiences with Raleigh, just kind of briefly, and then I'll make some kind of more general comments. I think what kind of youth organisations are doing well at the moment is really kind of going back to that designing and implementation of their activities, especially if they are a youth organisation. What they do tend to do really well is kind of bringing a diverse kind of range of young people from different countries and kind of different communities to be able to design the projects that not only they'll be implementing, but that will also help kind of people like them. I think that is kind of something we're kind of really doing well with. I think, and this is kind of an issue I see with quite a lot of organisations, is that sometimes they almost lack the kind of flexibility and the kind of ability to be able to just take very calculated risks, I think sometimes, which is understandable with kind of, especially kind of NGOs and charities. They are kind of responsible to an extent to kind of funders and donors. However, it can sometimes kind of lead to a more kind of bureaucratic kind of environment, in my experience, is anyway. I think kind of taking steps to kind of minimize those barriers will help young people to get their kind of voices heard more in kind of youth organizations. But also, I think it'll also just kind of help us kind of meet metrics and targets in general. However, I think to kind of round it up a little bit, I think in general, people, well, at least in my experiences, a lot of the organisations are getting there, if not kind of already in that frame of mind of, we are a youth organisation, we design everything we do through youth. We have many young people as stakeholders and kind of different figures throughout the organisations. It's just a few kind of small adaptations that kind of need to be done now to make it more inclusive. And I think what James touches on, kind of thinking about widening participation, especially kind of like in the global kind of volunteer kind of sector, I think, or in any kind of general, I think the financial kind of barrier to volunteering sometimes, whether that's even kind of nationally, if you struggle to kind of weigh up the benefit of spending your time kind of doing some stuff without kind of any financial incentive, and you weigh that up with kind of what you need to live, it can be a huge barrier to some people sometimes. So I think that's something that is quite prominent throughout the sector, I think. And yeah, but I think that's everything I've got to say for the moment anyway.
Cool, thank you for that, Annie. I just want to go over to Izzy. In the work that you do with young people, who do you think is missing, and what are you doing as an organisation to change that?
Well, in terms, what I kind of took from this, and what I thought, and what I took from knowing the organisation that I work for and other organisations I've been a part of, particularly mostly smaller organisations who are just kind of either just starting out or haven't had lots of growth. For example, DMK Potential, we're an incredibly hardworking team, but we're not massive or anything. There is still a lack of diversity within the teams, both in race, both in background, ability. For example, it was still a mostly white team, and that is not through a lack of trying to get other people on board, and it's also not through a lack of people from other races, other backgrounds, other abilities, other family lives. It's not through a lack of them trying to get onto our team either. It's through a communication barrier. We can advertise, and I think this is a thing that a lot of organisations struggle with, especially when you're small. We'll advertise ourselves as much as we can. We'll say, come and work with us, come and accept our work, come and be helped by us, come and help us. However, we just aren't quite advertising in the right places. Maybe it's because we don't have access to those communities, so we don't have, like, this isn't quite the right word, but I'm going to say we don't have an in to the community. So we have no way to try and get a message through to them, even though they may care about it just as much, if not more, than we do. Or it may just be that we maybe found these accounts through social media or something, but we haven't quite built up the trust with them. It's such an important thing, and I can say this so easily. It's so easy for me to say this coming from a white person, but other communities will know this. I would have thought a lot more. Anybody on here, feel free to come and interject with me, but it's so important for us to build up a trust and for other communities to know that we are legit and we are really here because we want to support you. We're not just here for our own gain. It can sometimes potentially look like that if a majority white organisation comes to I don't know, a Black influencer or an Asian community group or something, and we say, oh, we want to work with you. It may just look like, oh, they're trying to be a token thing, but that's because we're missing that element of building up the trust and uplifting the community that we want to work with first. Yeah, I think that's just a way that sometimes people are missing, and it's not because it's not because nobody wants to be there. It's because we just aren't disconnecting these barriers first. If anyone else wants to jump in on something like that, absolutely.
So Izzy, what is your organization doing to overcome these barriers in participation and engaging with young people from different backgrounds and stuff like that?
Yeah, so something that we're doing at the moment is the things what I've just said about building up the trust first, ensuring that we really are supporting people before we ask for their support, because they don't owe us anything. They really don't. And that's the whole point of DMK Potential as a youth group. What we aim to do is to uplift young people be that in the music sector, get them making their own music, or be that through, to be honest, anything else that they want to do, any community projects, or like the local conference of youth that we just held, that was to, similar to what James said, not to give them a voice, but to uplift their voice and make it heard by the people. Yeah, and another thing that DMK Potential does is we do offer paid roles. So for anybody who is struggling financially and just does not have the time to be able to give so much time and effort to an organisation, if they're not going to be able to earn from it, we do have paid roles, and we do have the volunteer role. So again, if it's something where you just don't have the time, you don't necessarily need lots and lots of money from it, or you don't need much money from it, but you just don't have the time to give to it, we have roles. For example, like how Annie's a trustee, we have trustee roles, and they are like something like 3 hours every few months or something. It's really just widening that flexibility of what we expect of people, and not even just what we expect of people, but what we can give back to them as well.
That sounds great. I think Asari wanted to come in and say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to express how much I agree with that point. It's a very it's a heavy point, actually. It's a very good one. One thing that my team that I worked with in my social action project to better personal and social development within my local community of Lewisham, what we done was we took on a cooperative kind of approach where we got our audience, basically our target, which was young people, to work with us. So the people that was leading the social actions and making the decisions and doing the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, these were young people of my age, like 17 to 18, 19. So they could actually see the threats because it was personal to them. What we also done is that we engaged with our community by going to places like youth clubs and running workshops there. So we built a relationship. So not only was we kind of helping ourselves in a way for that social action project, we was, in so doing, we was continually kind of updating our approach. So I think that's an approach that would be helpful with other projects. They kind of took that way of approach as well.
That sounds good. Some really tangible examples of how organizations can use like SWOT analysis and all that sort of stuff to come up and like overcome barriers to participation. I'm just going to pass it over to Lucy for our next question.
Okay, so our next question is to Naote about working at a local level. So part of our vision for the iwill movement is to reach deeper into communities and spotlight the importance of hyper-local youth social action. So my question to you is what are your approaches and practical tips to grassroots engagement?
I think this actually kind of leads on from the last comment, actually. Because one of my approaches is actually meeting young people where they are. So where they feel safe, where they like to be within their communities. It's kind of going to them and getting to know them on a very local grassroots level. So that could be anything from local events and youth clubs, schools, and actually spending time with them, getting to know them in their own environments. In terms of tips, I would say kind of connecting with grassroots organisations. Those who are already engaged in the community, have relationships, and that the young people are quite familiar with, not only because they have local knowledge, but they enable you to learn about, at a quite grassroots level, about the community, the demographic of the young people that are there, and what causes are important to them. And also, you know, sometimes young people don't get involved in youth social action because they simply are not aware of it or how to get involved, or that actually some of the skills they already have can be used to make quite a difference, and it can be very powerful. So by making roles flexible and even doing things like arranging events around youth social action that are open, that enable discussions and exploration around youth social action, you know, what may be on offer, how they can get involved. It gives a chance to meet other young people, get involved in activities. So kind of making it a little bit more accessible and flexible around the young people who may not know about youth social action, to give them that awareness and maybe get a little bit of a taste of it as well.
Sounds brilliant, thank you. To follow on from that, I want to go to Liv. Some people describe certain groups of young people hard to engage. What is your reflections on this kind of statement?
So for me, I've been an activist since the age of 12 and I'm now 19, and through quite a lot of things that I've done, this has been the response from a lot of adults in the room. And for me, it just emphasises their ignorance and lack of effort that they're putting into advertising the projects that they're doing, because young people aren't hard to engage, and it's almost the failure in their own structure they choose to put onto the young people. It's never the young people, it's always, in my opinion, the people who are blaming the young people's problem. And if we're going to try and improve the engagement that organisations have with young people, the organisations need to have a self-reflection moment. They need to strip back what they're doing and really question why it's failing, instead of putting their lack of engagement onto young people. Really reflect on the things that they're not doing to engage the young people within the communities that they're targeting, and also to really reflect on their audience. And if you're going into a community where actually it doesn't need your organisation, it doesn't need your project, why are you going to go in there? Why are you going to waste that time going into somewhere that actually would reject what you want? And also, I think with external organisations, something that I've experienced is they'll come in thinking they know every little thing about the community. They don't. And they'll come in not having spoken to a single person that lives there, and they've never taken time to really absorb the information of the people, the boots on the ground that are living day-to-day life within those communities. And another one to say as well, in terms of young people being hard to engage, that's a real damaging stereotype for young people, and it really sweeps all young people with, kind of paints young people with one brush, or tarnishes young people with one brush, and is a very negative approach to youth engagement and youth work. And yeah, it just makes me really angry. So sorry if I'm not conveying my thoughts well.
No, that's brilliant. You sound really passionate, which is fantastic. I'm going to hand back over to our co-chair, and he's going to give you the next question.
So the next question is about unlikely relationships. So the I Will movement has a big focus on place-based change. So partners working together differently, inspired through youth social action. I want to come over to Megan at Young Manchester and Louis and Osari at the Canal and River Trust. What is the most unexpected relationship that has emerged through your place-based youth social action work?
So I actually have two examples, one that's more personal to me and one that's more general and like related to the work that I do here at Young Manchester. So the first one would be how I met this partner at a law firm that I was networking at since I am a law student. I found out that he went to the same university as me in Manchester, and that he wanted to expand his non-profit tutoring organisation to Manchester. And I said, well, I work with Young Manchester and we work with amazing organisations here, like the youth centres here in Manchester, and we can connect you to a lot of young people that need tutoring services. And they can benefit from those free tutoring services that you offer. And we can make that connection with you, with your organisation, which is overall quite an unexpected relationship, because he's not previously connected to Manchester, but it stemmed from youth action and supporting children and young people in Manchester. But also on like a wider perspective with Young Manchester, we partner with so many people and organizations that the network that we have can be described as quite unexpected. And youth social action can have such a wide engagement, and it's supported by so many different communities that it makes unexpected or unlikely relationships hard to pinpoint. But specifically, I guess an example that we have is the We the Change event that we hosted in partnership with Reclaim, which is an amazing organization supporting young people, young working class people. So in that event, we invited a lot of different groups of people to perform, and as like panelists as well. So for example, we had Beyond Labels, which is a poetry creative performance group of children and young people that's supported by Young Identity, also a very good organization, and hosted at Home, which is a venue, an organization that we partner with. And so it's a lot of different people and a lot of different organizations coming together on one night, which could be described as like unexpected relationship. And yeah.
That sounds awesome. I think within like organizations where you have people from different backgrounds, so like staff members from different backgrounds, that can also create a lot of unexpected relationships because of like the work that they previously done. Like for example, some young people come from, like when you have a young person that comes into an organization for work experience, they might be like, oh, I don't work with X, Y, and Z, or I've worked at this charity, and they can kind of bring those connections to your organization, and like it might be like the starting point for a new relationship through for a new project or something like that. Osaru and Lewis, do you want to come on to that point?
I don't mind kicking off, and then I'll hand the ball to you, Osaru. But yeah, thanks very much for that. And it's been brilliant to hear from all of the other panelists so far as well, in terms of some of the insights shared. I think, wearing my hat of the role of being, chair of the Youth Engagement Advisory Group for the Canal and River Trust, which, just to give some context for people, that is a group that brings together youth sector professionals from organizations such as UK Youth, organizations such as the National Youth Agency, Mind, Street Games, Sport England, stuff like that. And these are experienced professionals who have a real understanding of the landscape within the voluntary youth sector. And what I'm there to do is to be able to bring them together to really consider the way in which they can go about being able to guide the Canal and River Trust as admittedly a non-youth organization. Yeah, I repeat, the Canal and River Trust is not a youth organization. In order to look at how they can improve their youth engagement, because the Canal and River Trust effectively has made a commitment to wanting to ensure that as an organization that has an asset of canals and waterways which stretches across 200 miles of this country, where there are millions of people who live within a 1 kilometer of a canal and waterway in this country. Interestingly, not me, because I was born and raised in Lewisham, we don't have no canals down there, but still, like, as an organization that is there in order to be able to provide an asset to communities like that, they're saying, yo, we need to step up and be able to, do what we can to ensure that young people are engaged accordingly. And so that's why the Canal and River Trust, as early as 2013, was one of the first organizations to pledge as part of the iwill campaign. Do you get what I mean? That's why also last year within the lockdown, they made a very significant commitment to the power of youth, right? And so they've been able to demonstrate some real commitments across each of those 5 pillars within the Power of Youth Charter. So what's been interesting from my standpoint when I talk about unlikely relationships is, let's just start with that particular group that I chair. It's not necessarily one of those things where you'd expect to see those kinds of organizations, who admittedly probably talk amongst themselves all the time, be in a room with an organization like the Canal and River Trust on a quarterly basis, thinking about the way in which those canals and waterways can serve young people, because it's not your traditional youth club setting, right? The way in which we normally envision youth work occurring and or youth social action occurring, you wouldn't normally put it in that particular setting. So from a place-based standpoint, where you've actually identified that, I think that's quite interesting, because as I've touched on, canals and waterways run through specific communities. So you've got an opportunity there, but the idea of engaging young people is quite often limited to probably 4 or 5 different settings. So this is great in terms of being able to open that door. And that's why the whole youth engagement strategy at the Canal and River Trust focuses on social action as one pillar, but then also employability and skills and health and well-being, because sometimes the other two need to be the gateway for bringing them towards social action. So when we talk about relationships and partnerships, as I mentioned, some of the organizations that sit on that particular advisory group, that automatically shows you that actually just by having those relationships, the diversity in youth social action opportunity that now exists is going to be increased. But beyond that as well, I think what's interesting is when you now take it into some of these local communities, because admittedly the Canal River Trust obviously has a regional approach, you see some amazing adoptions or stretches of waterway that I think is beautiful. I mean, I literally just came back from a meeting in Leicester, and one of the things I love about part of the Leicester Canal and the Grand Union is where there is a young Somali group who have done some amazing work adopting a stretch of the waterway in Leicester, and they've used that as a real opportunity to bring together young people from their community. There are other parts of the country where people from all different backgrounds are actually using the canals and waterways here as a replica of what they might have experienced back home in their own countries from different parts of the world, in order to put on things like, you know, boat races, and some are growing fruits on orchards and all that kind of stuff. So what they're doing is they're nurturing their young people in their own culture, but using the canals and waterways here as a part of that. So what it means is the Canal River Trust has actually had to take a step back and go, instead of us dictating what youth social action opportunities or a youth offering looks like, let's just say we have an asset. What do you want to use it for? And then by doing that, it's allowing people to have more ownership over the experience that's created for them. Do you know what I mean? So that has been so interesting, because now some of those localized relationships, they're going to be sustained for ages, because people from those communities see it as this is key to the generations that come behind us in our communities. But I mean, don't get me wrong, beyond that, you know, just shameless plug, during iwill week, I know the Canal River Trust has an event with Volunteering Matters on the 24th of November. So that's exciting. That's in the East Midlands itself as well. So, you know, this is another example of, you know, a national organization that's really there to go about being able to champion volunteering, finding a whole new way of being able to do so by working with an organization like the Trust. So by the Trust making those commitments as part of their youth engagement strategy, being able to, you know, honor initiatives that are sector-wide, such as the Power of Youth Charter and iwill, but then also being able to say, hold on a second, instead of us dictating what we think you could do, because they have some great stuff, you know, resource packs that young people can pick up and do activities and stuff like that, but also saying, let's pause. We have an asset. What do you want to do? And that actually being able to lead the way in which young people engage has been so much more effective. But with that being said, I'm going to hand over to Asaru, because I know you got a couple of things to touch on as it relates to sort of the Black history stuff in East London and that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. Obviously, building on top of that, I'm relatively new to the Canal and River Trust. However, I've attended some of the events in the open days, and what I have an unexpected relationship that was built from that was actually interacting with people like from the Docklands, the Museum of London Docklands, and Paul Boateng, the House of Commons, and actually being in that environment and finding that these people have a genuine and legitimate interest in my community and in young people, and actually seeing the passion firsthand of how they want to improve the relationship and make society a better place and assist us as young people in the youth fellowship for the Canal and River Trust to make that happen, which was, for me, coming from an environment where I'm not normally used to seeing that kind of interest from people in what I used to consider as high places. That was very unexpected. Because prior to that, I'd only worked with YPE, and the most unexpected relationship was with the council. But obviously that's something that you would expect to assist you in youth relationships or in social action projects to do with the youth. So that was something big.
Perfect. Love that. I love the tangible examples of young people getting involved in like canals and stuff like that. I think we're going to come on to the final question, and Lucy's going to introduce that for us.
Okay, so the final question is about building a movement. So for iwill Week this year, it's all about building movement and social action across the UK. So our final question is open to everyone. So what I will do is I'll just sort of go around the room. And it is a quick fire round, so if you can kind of keep it as short and sweet as possible, that'd be great. So the question is, what movements, past or present, have inspired you, and in one statement, what have you learned from them? So for myself, I've been working here down in Devon and Cornwall with Devon and Somerset's Fire and Rescue Service, and they provide a learn to live movement, essentially, which is all about keeping young people safe, using the roads, and keeping young drivers safe. So that's inspired me, and it's one thing that is just an absolute fantastic thing. And the thing that I've learned from them is that you shouldn't be afraid to speak up about road safety, and if you're concerned about the way that someone's driving or the way that you see someone driving, say something. So that's for me. So Izzy, what do you think? What's one that's inspired you?
So for me, my social action started back in high school, but it kind of actually really kicked off when I done the NCS program, which is obviously National Citizen Service. I done the summer program, which was about 4 weeks, and that was 6-7 years ago now. And that's a movement in itself, because it's a local program, but you're part of a big organization where programs are run up and down the country. And obviously their whole aim is to have every young person do the program and then get involved in the stuff afterwards. And what I've learned from that is that there's loads of young people out there with similar mindsets that want to do stuff, and you can really continue your work. So in the final 2 weeks of the NCS program, you do a social action project, but you can actually there's a platform for you to continue your social action if you wanted to. And that's something that's really like growing on for me, and I've continued my social action journey ever since then.
Brilliant. Izzy, what about you?
Mine's quite a bit bigger than your guys', but it does relate down to a smaller area. So mine was going to be the climate strike movement, because there's one person who, I'm not going to name them, but who was in a very similar position to myself. I was having a lot of struggles at home, and a lot of struggles just with my mental health, and discovering quite a bit about myself that I didn't already know. And it really felt like it was holding me back. And this one person who was in the climate strike movement, she was having incredibly similar experience to me, and she still managed to do so much for it. And it really did show me that these movements are inclusive, and you really can get into these things, and you can do a lot of work for the things that you care about. Obviously there's no pressure on anybody to do anything like this, but it really is, once you get into it and once you give it a go, you realize how much you can do, and how much it can help you out of if you're in a dark place for some reason.
That's amazing, thank you. James, I know obviously you're a bit older than some of the other guys here, but is there a movement that you've seen through your work that has inspired you?
I was going to talk about the Suffragette movement, but not because I'm that old. But yeah, I think I was taking some inspiration, I suppose, from obviously Greta with starting Fridays for Future, and then thinking about Emily Pankhurst and the suffragettes, and obviously fantastic to see strong female leads sort of taking charge there. But I think the one thing I suppose you could apply this to a lot of other movements as well is, you know, whether it's Martin Luther King, anyone like that, it's just taking one person to make a stand and to sort of turn against the tide and say, no, I'm not having this. And actually that, I think, is just incredibly powerful and incredibly infectious. And I think you can see that through so many different things at the moment, whether it's Greta, Malala, whoever it might be, young people saying, no, I'm not having it anymore, no chance, you know, stand aside, we're going to do things differently. And I think that is one of the most powerful things I think you can do as part of a movement, because actually you find that most people are probably thinking in the same things as well. It's just that they're perhaps not had the wherewithal or the confidence or whatever to kind of stand up and make that statement too. So I think you just need that one person to just make a stand, and then I think you'll find that actually a lot more people will join in with you quite quickly, as we're obviously seeing with like Fridays for Future and so many other things as well.
Thank you for that. Annie, what about yourself?
I think mine is quite recent, actually, as in over the last month. So I've recently started university, and I don't know why, but freshers this year has just been like a mass, like, I don't know, almost upheaval of incidents of spiking and stuff, and just more kind of like violence and nights out, spiking by like injections and a load of like horrible like stuff that we should not kind of have to deal with, regardless of gender and anything else. So I think I mean, once that started happening, you saw very quickly club boycotts, kind of, yeah, bar boycotts, and then like, yeah, just very quickly it became something that like we were aware of and we couldn't do much about, to something like a case where we have like drink coverings, we have rapid kind of drug tests like taking place, bag searches and stuff like that inside kind of like our nightclubs and bars. I think it just, yeah, it just goes to show like how not only a boycott can work sometimes, but also like, yeah, it just like when you kind of put your foot down almost, it can kind of make that change, and it can kind of spark other people to recognize that it isn't okay and that things can actually be done about a very kind of practical problem, like that sort of behavior on nights out and stuff. But yeah,
I totally agree with you, Annie. Thank you. Megan.
So the movement that I chose was like fighting Asian hate in the UK, especially due to like the pandemic. Like when it started, there was a lot of like hate crimes. And so I was really inspired by it because there were so many people using their platforms to raise awareness about it. And I've just learned that young people will always rise up to the occasion, like they're eager to make a change. And that's really nice to see, and it's really reassuring as well. And it applies for other movements as well. And even though like marginalized communities don't have, like we don't have shared experiences, but we can empathize with each other and understand to a certain extent what we feel when these things happen. So I just felt that like the fighting Asian hate movement, well, we've always been fighting hate crimes, but I think specifically during the pandemic, it was something that that inspired me.
That's brilliant. I think it's really important. So that's, yeah, something that I would love to look into more myself. Liv, how about you? What movements inspired you?
For me, I don't have one specifically. It's more so every movement that's led by young people. When I started my journey, it was always me fighting for my voice to be heard. Whereas now it's adults fighting for their voices to be heard in spaces that are dominated by young people. So for me, absolutely every kind of positive social action movement that is led by young people and showing adults that we're the future and we can make change with that.
Thank you for that, Liv. Naomi, what about you?
My movement was actually something I learned about only within the last year, and it was the bus boycott in Bristol. It took place way before my time in 1963, but I didn't know much about it beforehand, and it kind of arose from a bus company refusing to employ Black or Asian bus crews in the city, and the boycott took place for several months. And actually on the day that Martin Luther did the I Have a Dream speech, it was actually announced that there would be no more discrimination for employing people on the buses. And it was actually cited as being quite influential in the Race Relations Act in 1965 and 1968. So that was quite an inspiration to me. That from that I've learned that, or a point I took from that was, although it was local social action, it can have a very national impact for change on legislation and what government are doing, which impacts and actually is beneficial to us today.
That's so interesting, actually. I'm going to have a read up on that myself. Lewis, how about you? What's inspired you and what have you learned from that movement?
It's hard to choose one, isn't it? Let's be honest. I mean, like, I'll do a shameless plug internally. I mean, as someone who doesn't work for the Canal River Trust but chairs that board and therefore gets to see things from an ever so slightly removed standpoint, they did something really powerful this year, led by their manager for youth and civil society, who I think is amazing, and they called it their Year of Youth. So I mentioned before that the trust is not a youth organization, so it has to do a lot of work to build capacity for colleagues within the organization to get comfortable with working with young people, what that looks like, how that could be incorporated into their roles, so that it's not an add-on, but it's really integral to everything they do. And seeing the work that's been done since January in this year of youth they've done internally to really get every single member of that organization to appreciate how they can be working with young people more effectively within their work, for me, has been an inspiration in itself, because that's not easy to do when you're taking an organization that's usually very infrastructural and operational. To do that, that's inspiring in my opinion. But beyond that, I'm going to vibe similarly off of the sort of thing in regards to, with last year, we saw more engagement with the Black Lives Matter movement than we've ever seen before. And one of the things that most people hopefully were aware of was an increased level of focus on something called the Black curriculum, right? And so, this is a real approach to trying to decolonize education in this country. There were thousands of people that got behind this initiative, thousands of people that signed a letter to go to government and say, listen, we need to do some work to decolonize our history curriculum in schools, to which the government turned around and said, the curriculum's fine, basically. But what I loved most was the Black curriculum didn't stop there. They said, we're still going to do what we're doing. And I now have spoken to multiple councils, not only within London, but in other places, who have said, doesn't matter what government said, we're taking this on and this is being implemented in our schools. That to me is inspiring, because that's a group of young people who lead that particular initiative and organization, who have said, it doesn't matter what the highest level of decision makers say, this is what we're here to do. So for me, that's been extremely inspiring to see just in the last sort of 18 months or so.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Saru, what about you?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So one movement that really inspires me, there's actually two. I really want to mention two, so I will. But one movement of the two is the aftermath of the New Crossfire, where there was thousands of people that was marching with the slogan 13 dead, nothing said. That really resonates with me, because that's an occasion of something in my local community in South East London, where something had occurred and the community came together with something common to protect. They all had something to protect and they had passion behind it, and action was enacted as a result of it. That's something that really inspires me and gives me more faith in my community and makes me more obligated to do stuff for my community. Another thing is the civil rights movement, for a similar reason, but that one inspires me more because within that movement, the suffragettes, or the people leading the movement, had a lack of resources, and with those lack of resources, they was able to create cohesion and manipulate and use those resources in a way where they could make change that their generations are reaping the benefits of now to this day.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for your answers. They all seem amazing and so inspiring. There is a few that I am going to look into more myself. I'm going to hand back to Izzy, and he's going to finish off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. We've had some really good answers and some really good conversation here today. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I just want to say a huge thank you to our guests for all their thoughts and honest insights. We hope that you've enjoyed being here today. And for everyone that's tuned in, please do look at the work all our guests do, and what they're really doing to live the power of youth. Today's session is just one of many events and activities being delivered for this year's iwill week. So please make sure to visit iwill.org.uk to see the full listing of events, activities and resources. If you've enjoyed today's session, please tell people about it by sharing it on your social media accounts and tagging at iwill_movement, hashtag iwillweek21 and hashtag power of youth on all social media channels. And that's it from us. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for joining us.